tell us when you're ready. Oh, we are?
Oh,
Y'all
okay.
wrong. Y'all are wrong. Y'all are wrong. Okay, so since we're live, let's really think about how excited I am about this experience. So Lisa is my whole sister. This is Lisa Price sitting on the couch. And all the things, entrepreneur, activist, mother, friend, daughter. I mean, all the things that I hold dear, you are. And I was just saying, like, when's the first time, we all experienced your products? I remember just being a young mother, and you had like the products where it was in the I think it was like the jars that had the sea salt in the bottom and the oils in the shell. And I thought I was just getting into everything because I would just take a shower after I put the kids to bed. It was a whole ritual. I would just scrub down and shea butter up and smell so good and just sit there going, I'm not going anywhere but here. And this is what I needed. Could you tell me first, thank you for being here, and second, how did this all start? Like, where did this experience of being able to make magic and potions, where did that come from?
It started with a love for fragrance. So I've been in love with fragrance for as long as I can remember. And the first memories I have of scent are my grandmother's Chanel #5 that she kept on her dresser, the smell of my mother's cheek, and she always used Pond's cold cream on her face. And I just remember her face being really soft, and then whatever that Pond's smell
Was,
is.
yeah.
And roses. My Nana had roses in her backyard. And when I was 5, I was a flower girl for my Aunt Judith's wedding. And I was given a basket of rose petals by the florist. And the florist said, you're going to throw them on the ground when you walk down the aisle. And then your aunt is going to walk behind you.
I remember this story.
And I looked at the rose petals and I was like, I can't throw these on the floor. It's a whole basket of rose petals. And I'm 5, right? Like, no one had ever given me a basket of rose petals.
Understood the value.
And so as I walked down the aisle, my aunt tells this story that I stood her up at her own wedding because I took out one petal at
You
a
can
time.
have this.
Yes, so it was da 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 petal, da 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 petal,
Keeping the rest for me.
and I got to the front, and I still had a whole basket of rose petals.
So I feel like that's how you've led your life. Like, you give so much, but what I've experienced with you, in as much as you give, you figured out a way to leave a lot for yourself. When we opened up this space, I think it was September or so, almost 6 years now. I remember you coming in. It was still smelling like paint. It was still crazy in here. We were just like, we got to open up and get people on these tables, right? You came in, and I'd already been seeing you at your home, and you said, I don't know, and I'm telling this story, right? I don't know. Spirit just told me I need to give you this. And you gave me an envelope, and it was just like, it was money, right? But it was like, whatever the amount of money it was you understanding the amount of effort that was being put to make this experience happen. And when you're building your dream, sometimes the resources, you don't have it. But being resourceful means that you open your heart and you allow the people that you love to come in and love up on you. How do you, because I know how you do it for others, how do you allow people to love up on you? And how important is that for you?
I won't say that I don't allow people to love up on me, because I do. But when it does happen, I tend to be so surprised by it.
I was.
I guess I don't expect it. I know that it's what the universe does, but I never expect it. So when it happens, it's so wonderful. just this week, I had a conversation with a friend, and she needed to talk about business things and didn't have anybody else in her life that she could talk to. And
Ooh,
she was
child.
like, the only person I know who's gone through this is Lisa. And she sent me a huge bouquet of flowers
Mm,
the same day. Like, we spoke in the morning at 11, and by 6 o'clock I had flowers. Now, I didn't speak to her expecting
of
anything.
course, yeah.
I was grateful to help, because I know that feeling when you don't have anyone to talk to. And I used to not have people to talk to. I
Hmm.
figured stuff out by myself.
Mm-hmm.
So when I get to help someone, I feel really grateful that they don't have to be alone. So the flowers were just like the icing on top of an already delicious cake.
That's the giving and then not expecting, and then you're able to receive.
Yeah.
I remember the first time. So our children, our sons, are someone they calls Forrest his best friend, like his best friend, right? That's my brother, and Forrest would come over to our house, and I had no idea who Forrest was because it's 8 children. There's always a million children in our house. And I trusted my children to only bring children in the home that they weren't gonna disrupt, their lives. So Forrest was just yet another child in the house. And one day he was speaking about something, and he's like, "Yeah, like my grandmother Carol." And I don't know why I suddenly looked up and I said, "Forrest, who's your mom?" Right? I remember I was washing dishes, and I said, "Who is your mom?" He's just like, "Lisa." I said, "Get out of town," right? So, but it was I remember the fine when I actually finally got to meet you. It was like sometime much 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 later. I thanked you for always feeding my kid because I knew as much as your child was in my house, I knew my child was in your house. So which
Uh
brings
huh.
me to like family. Like, how do you find your flow as a mother, but also as Lisa Price?
Whew. It's I shouldn't say it's easier now, because it's not really easier now, but it is a lot different because now I have two adult children and one
Mm-hmm.
teenager,
Mm-hmm.
instead of everyone officially legally being my responsibility.
Nah, they just your responsibility.
which was the case back then. Um, and then I traveled a lot,
Yeah,
but I'm a homebody. So when I was at home,
you were
I was
home.
at home.
Mm-hmm.
And there was something about the reality of home that always kept me humble. Like, you go out, and there are some job trips that are very glamorous,
Mm-hmm.
and then there are some job trips that are very, I saw the airport and the hotel conference room, and that's it.
It's
Like,
work.
you're like, oh my God, you went to Seattle? Yeah,
Yeah,
not
not
really.
really.
I went to the Seattle airport, and
Mm-hmm.
then I saw this
Mm-hmm.
building,
Mm-hmm.
you know. Um, but when I would have trips that were, a bit over the top and wonderful, like once I flew in a private jet with
Mm.
Mary J. Blige to LA and did a television show, you know. But I came home and it was like, Mom, I'm hungry. So it's like, where's the jet?
Where's the jet? Don't
where's
y'all
the
know who
where's
I
the
am?
chauffeur? Like, what happened?
No.
Um, but it's that balance,
Mm-hmm.
like, oh yes, I'm mom, right? I
Mm-hmm.
have I have this job, I have this responsibility, I love these people,
Absolutely.
and there was also, when Becca came into our lives, that's my youngest. Forrest and Ennis were 9 and 10,
Mm.
and she's a baby.
Mm-hmm.
So when I would speak at events and things like that, and people would ask, how do you juggle? They would say, how do you balance, actually? How do you balance everything?
And your
And
answer was,
it's not
it's not a
balancing, it's
balance.
a juggling act,
Mm-hmm.
And I would just say, I just tell myself, don't drop the baby. Because if the other two fall, They're 9 and 10. They're gonna get a
They
little
gonna be all
bump.
right. Don't
They'll
drop
be
the
fine, but I
baby.
can't drop the baby
Don't drop
because
the baby.
she could really get hurt. But
Hmm.
it's just a metaphor for you really have to focus on what's important,
Yeah.
and you got to let the BS go.
Yeah.
And once I was at a conference where a woman was speaking, and she was a very powerful executive at a time when there were hardly any female executives,
Hmm.
and she was probably the one unicorn who was female and black. And she
Hmm.
said that she came home one night and her husband had given everybody breakfast for
For dinner.
dinner. And at first she's appalled,
Hmm.
like
Pancakes.
how could they have breakfast for. And she said, and then she realized the only person who had a problem with it was
Was her.
her.
Hmm.
And if it doesn't happen all the time, why am I sweating it?
But I think it's also this concept of perfectionism, right?
Yes.
Like you feel like you should have everything under control.
Yes.
Like there's a an opinion about me that I don't return phone calls.
Mm.
I'm side eyeing everybody in this room, and I do, but I do. I love this definition that I just heard. Like I do a lot of things well, and some things I don't. Right, and
Yeah.
communicating, it's easy to communicate with me, but it's hard to get me. Right, and
Yeah.
once you get me, and we're in that same sync, then I'm able to do that. So that perfection of wanting to be for everyone and being present for everyone, I realized was impossible and
Mhm.
also was a detriment to me.
Mhm.
How are you mastering that? Just that space of going, it's me, it's for me. Because I know the last 2 years really, you really turned like a pivot on your health and how you were taking care of yourself.
Mhm.
What what was the decision? What was the catalyst that made you go, okay, this is it. This is how I'm doing this?
Well, the decision to take care of my health was actually longer than 2 years ago. It's just gone through different phases.
Okay.
So the first phase was I can't do this, and that
Hmm.
was 13 years ago. I was
You
too
can't do what?
I was too tired all the time,
Hmm.
and it wasn't making sense. And
Okay.
I was actually being successful at weight loss at that time, but not successful enough and
Hmm.
not like quick enough.
Hmm.
And then if something disrupted my life, then it all came to a standstill.
And a disruption would be like what?
All of a sudden having to travel back to back to back.
Hmm.
You're in hotels,
Hmm.
you don't have access to your equipment, to your regular things. The hotel gym is or you don't have time to go, or you're tired.
So you just weren't a priority.
Right.
Yeah.
And I had to make myself the priority. I had to make myself take care of myself.
Hmm.
And I started to schedule things that most people, including myself, viewed as frivolous,
Talk
like
about that.
manicures, pedicures, massages, getting my hair shaped up,
Hmm.
covering my gray,
Hmm.
all of that stuff that's like, oh, you're having a spa day. No,
No.
this is maintenance, right? Of what
This
makes
makes me feel good.
this is not just makes me feel good, but I'm running a beauty company.
Come on now.
So I can't show up looking like who did it and ran. you
That's the
know,
point. That's the point.
like people not and I'm not saying that, if you don't look a certain way, you can't but you can't show up tired,
Hmm.
haggard,
Hmm.
your hair is not quite right. You're selling hair care products.
You are
If you
you're
don't
it.
trim your ends, no amount of shea butter is gonna fix that. Like you gotta. So those things were in my calendar the same
Hmm.
way meetings were in my calendar, and taking the kids somewhere or going to somebody's play. It's in the schedule.
So scheduling that for yourself, right? I find that I've always had to put, or at least I thought I had to put everyone first, right? So kids got glasses first, kids went to the dentist first, kids got to the doctor first, and then I would come in after. But there's something about my own worth that not just even that I'm this face of this business and Ade is this face of this business, but Ade takes care of himself. Like he rests, he, stretches and so forth, all the things.
Mhm.
But what I found was I wasn't putting myself as a priority, not only in the physical sense, but in the financial sense.
Mhm.
And so it was like, okay, you're investing in your business, but to say I'm going to go get my nails done or I'll get my hair done or colored, I found that very difficult to just go and look at that budget and
Mhm.
say that was important. Where where did that happen? Because I remember you spoke to me about being on an airplane and you would study magazines on, because there is a thing that comes into play when you are trying to elevate from one level to the next.
Mhm.
And how did you know that you could show up as yourself but also be more aware? Like, how did you get the information? What was the things that you have to do?
Well, I was fortunate that the company was in a place where it could afford, as a part of marketing, to provide me with certain services. So I would never have been able to pay for a stylist myself,
Mm-hmm.
but the company was able to pay for one for me. Now, that doesn't mean that because you have a stylist, everything in your closet is designer. No,
No.
we didn't have that kind of budget. This was someone who could look at your body, look at your coloring, look at how
Mm.
you move, what's comfortable, and help to create a silhouette that works for you, that starts to become part of your brand.
Mm-hmm.
And the more that they do it, the more that you learn how to do it for yourself. And you start to learn what doesn't work for you. Um, so that was something that I think today is a little bit easier to achieve with social media,
Mm-hmm. It's true.
following
Yeah.
following certain people
Yeah.
who give that information out on
Absolutely.
their platforms. But back then, I needed someone to come into my house and show me how to make the clothes work.
And this was like in what year?
This was 2006.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. Like I look,
2006, 2007.
it's 2006 to now is not that long of a time, but there's so many things that has happened and changed so quickly.
Mm-hmm.
For me, just this last, 2020, like for all of us, was different,
Yeah.
right? And of course, all of the traumatic things that happen to us as humans, but there's also this thing of self-awareness that happened for me and
Mm-hmm.
how I showed up for
Mm-hmm.
myself. Like my voice got louder.
Mm-hmm.
I I say what I mean. No is really okay. And
Mm-hmm.
my yes really means something now
Mm-hmm.
because I can't be there for everyone.
Yep.
I've been noticing your social media, like you're showing up and you've always showed up, but
Mm-hmm.
there is like this unapologetic, here I am
Mm-hmm.
woman that I know behind the scenes that is showing up even more in front. And how comfortable are you in yourself right now?
The most comfortable that I have ever been.
Mm.
And what I went through in 2020, there was a period of time in 2020 when I actually felt guilty
Mm-hmm.
because there was so much terrible going on, and I was somewhat ecstatic because I'm an introvert
Mm-hmm.
and a homebody,
And you got to stay
and
home.
you just told me I can't go outside. Say what? Wait, I have to stay here?
I can.
Bet.
I got this. It's true. It's true.
Oh, I can bake and I can
Mm.
knit
And you can
and
knit.
I can watch Netflix and wait, I can work from home.
I mean, I feel like that first couple weeks of knowing that everyone was home, it took away the stress of, oh, I have to go out to work, right?
We all got a chance to literally get off the merry-go-round, which never happens.
Ever.
It never stops.
Mm-hmm.
If you get off of it, you're jumping off of it,
Tuck and roll.
and you go right,
It's a tuck and roll moment.
and
Yeah.
it stopped,
Mm-hmm.
and they said, okay, all of y'all get off.
And I was like, you ain't got to tell me where's my bag. I'm out. Where's it?
And
Yeah.
and so now there's things that we know we can do.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, oh, we can have a meeting over the computer,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't have to fly to Arkansas.
You could be right here.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Hmm.
I'm never going
I'm
there
never
again.
going. I'll be right here.
I'm not flying to Arkansas again. You know,
Wow.
I mean, of course, yes,
Arkansas is good. We'll go if we need
there'll be
to.
a trip. Yeah,
Hmm.
but it's not
Mandatory.
just standard operating procedure.
It's a different procedure that's coming into play, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And then on the social awareness side of things, all of a sudden, I'm having conversations with white colleagues that we never had before. There were people that didn't know that my children
Mm-hmm.
are subject to that scrutiny.
Right.
The assumption was
Of course.
it's only in certain neighborhoods or certain economic status and areas where there's high crime. Not that it was okay. They weren't saying that it was okay,
They're just
but
saying it
they
wasn't
thought it was
affecting.
isolated
Mm-hmm.
to that area. And it wasn't until we all started talking about it at work and talking about it to each other and talking about the things that we never talked about with our white colleagues
Mm-hmm.
before,
Mm-hmm.
that they were like, wait, that happens to your kids?
Yeah, it
You
does.
know? But but
You're
you're my boss, but you're the founder, yeah.
yeah.
But my son is still a black man.
Mm-hmm.
So he ain't
Walking
shit
through this
as
world.
far as those
Mm-hmm.
people are concerned.
Mm-hmm.
And once that like veil was lifted and we don't have to be quiet anymore because y'all saw it,
Your voice.
it's like
Mm-hmm.
don't think I'm gonna let you forget.
And so when you navigate through those spaces, right? Like when you look around as the black woman that you are, and I say that to say that the amount of people who I know personally, myself included, who has benefited from your existence, like you are no joke. The advice that you give, the love that you give, the example that you are, we can look at many different small businesses who are emulating you right now, just
Mm-hmm.
trying to be who they think you are. What is it that you would tell the young entrepreneur? I'm talking 21, 22, who is coming out with this idea of how they're going to show up in this world. You've you've risen from just the small business platform. You've done something that not a lot of small businesses are able to do. You've climbed out of that space and moved into another space.
Mm-hmm.
But are you still like the only face that looks like you in a room when you walk in?
Mm. Less so,
Mhm.
but still nowhere near parity.
And when you speak to the young entrepreneur who is coming up, like how do you navigate that? And like what would you say to them to be able to navigate their process? Because their businesses are becoming popular, it's becoming lucrative, and then you bump into this reality that is not what you thought it was going to be based on how people
Mm-hmm.
react to you. Sometimes you being the only room. Sometimes I walk into some rooms and I'm like, where is everybody? I'm like, oh, it's
Mm-hmm.
me. I gotta be here to
Mm-hmm.
let people in.
Well, there's a few things in what you were saying. One, I don't come into contact very often with entrepreneurs quite that young,
Mm-hmm.
21, 22. So
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to speak about what their existence is because I
They
don't
don't know.
know.
Mm-hmm.
I come into contact more with the 40 somethings, maybe 30s, mid
Mm-hmm.
30s.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I think it's important for them to know their history because
I'm smiling.
white people always know their history,
Mm.
but they're also not in a position where they have to respect how rare their history is.
Is yeah.
It's a given.
Yeah.
We all know their history because that's what most of us were taught.
Taught exactly.
So they can get away with some of that arrogance, the I'm going to do it better than anybody who's done it before.
Yeah.
But you're walking in spaces
Mm-hmm.
where the fact that you have a place to put your foot
Come on now.
meant that 9 people went out of business, 7 people died, 6 people got their company stolen. You know, like real talk, right?
Shoulders
Right.
that you're
So
standing
you
on.
have to walk with a bit more reverence and respect,
Exactly.
not kowtow.
Mm-hmm.
You still have your voice, but you
Mm-hmm.
just have to understand that you're standing on the shoulders of other people and the backs of other people in a way that your white counterparts are not. Um, but then you also have to recognize for yourself that you are doing things without a roadmap. You're doing things without cushion. You're doing things without forethought. You're doing things without hindsight. You're doing things without advice because it ain't there.
You hear these gems that you're dropping? It's not.
It's not there.
there.
It's
Mm-hmm.
not there. And you also, if you're a woman and you're a black woman,
Mm-hmm.
you don't get to be loud about it because then, oh, you're the angry black woman, you know. So there's this dance, and then you're also expected, because we're multitaskers
Yes.
as women and we're problem solvers as women, and you know how we will say that the DNA is inside of us, that certain things trigger us, right? Because of slavery, because of what our ancestors went through.
Post-traumatic slave
There were
disorder.
certain
Yep.
things that
Mm-hmm.
trigger us, right?
Mm-hmm. The
Well, then
remembrance.
the same thing applies on the other side,
Absolutely.
where we have, you know, white friends and coworkers and people that we come into contact with who are not necessarily aware that they are looking at us as black women in the workplace to be the problem solver,
Mm-hmm.
to be the one to fix it,
Mm-hmm.
because
Which is so unfair.
but they don't know that they're
Doing that.
doing that the
Mhm.
same way we don't always know why something triggers us.
So even though
So-
they don't know that they're doing it, do we know that we're stepping into those places?
Not always.
Mm.
And what I feel they have to be told is, don't give the black woman in your office the promotion over the division that's fallen apart because you know she's the one who can fix it.
Mm-hmm.
Give her something that's thriving and see
Mhm.
what she does with that.
Because why does
too
she?
often we can count on you.
You can do it.
Because and
The way that you work with people.
and
way that
you
do
know,
that.
and we're gonna do it
Mhm.
because you know
'Cause that's what you
We're gonna
do.
get some
Yeah.
more money, and
Mhm.
you know we
Mhm.
want to do better, but it can't always be that. We can't always have the extra hard struggling.
Say that again. That's it. I don't want to keep struggling.
Right.
I don't.
Right.
I don't want to always have to do the hard thing.
Right.
I'm willing to do my part, but I swear I sit in the lap of luxury in my mind all the time, and it's a nice place.
Mhm.
It is, and it's not. To me, when I think of being able to be successful in my process, right? We don't have in my lineage, in my family, like 4 or 5 different generations of businesses that I can look back and say,
Right.
you know, Uncle so and so, how did you do that? In fact, I'm probably the auntie that my family looks at. I'm the daughter, I'm the niece that they look at and go,
Mhm.
oh, well, she's doing that. When we don't have an example of the person who's able to say no and able to show up in a certain way,
Mhm.
and we have to be that example. You bump heads a lot with
Yeah.
not only the outward stuff but your inward stuff. Like, what are the voices that you, I like to call them, you know, we have outward enemies that we like, okay, you know, let's stay protected.
Mhm.
But it's the inward stuff, the procrastination, the insecurities,
Mhm.
those little voices. What did you do, or how do you deal with those inner voices that show up when you are trying to be your best self?
Oh man. Um,
Child.
it's an easier thing to do today because I have the benefit of therapy, and if I was somebody that had Oprah money, I would try to figure out how to give people therapy
Yes.
because it's so critical. It's
Say that.
so important.
Say that.
It is
Say
so
that.
important.
Mm-hmm.
But before therapy, you have, moments where you doubt yourself and you don't understand why you're feeling the things that you're feeling. You become really good at
Mm-hmm.
compartmentalizing because you simply cannot
Deal
deal
with
with
that.
a certain thing
Mm-hmm.
in that moment. And I learned that there were two Lisas in 2018, because in 2018 my one of my brothers
Mm.
was found in his apartment in a coma, and we don't know how he got that way, why, and I didn't know if he was going to wake up.
Mm-hmm.
And it was the week before Thanksgiving, and I was in the hospital, um, letting family know, letting my other siblings know because our parents are gone. And um, there was the other Lisa who was like, well, this might not work out well.
Mm-hmm.
And, it's the week before Thanksgiving. People are going to be going out of town. You might want to start making some phone calls because you're going to have to probably plan a funeral
Hmm.
at Thanksgiving. And I literally had to stand like within myself and tell her to shut
Shut
up
up.
because I can't pray for him to live
Woo.
while you are telling me how to plan in the event of his death.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when I realized, oh, that's her job. She steps in when
Mm.
I can't
Mm-hmm.
deal with something right now, but I still have this other things to do. So she's the one that, is in front of the camera on HSN
Mm-hmm.
when I need to go cry because my uncle died,
Mm-hmm.
but I got to go make this money. So she stands up there and starts talking about Minoy shampoo and conditioner and blah blah blah.
She's so good at it.
Very good at it. Um, but you can't live like that.
You
You
cannot.
can hustle like that.
Mm.
You can grind like that, but you can't live like that.
You can exist, but you're not actually living,
Right.
right? And so
Right.
there's when we first my first year here, I in life wellness, that first 6 months was hectic, right? It was everything that you can think of being thrown at us, including my father dying,
Mm.
right? And when daddy died, it was, oh, you still have to exist doing this thing and exist doing this thing, which was impossible. So I
Mhm.
stopped. I
Mhm.
sat down and I mourned and I experienced the experience that I needed to do. I don't know if we were in a further along in the business that I would have been afforded that experience, but I remember just going, I can't do both of these things. I'm not I think it was then that I decided I wasn't a multitasker. Like I
Mhm.
really focused in on what I'm focusing on, that experience, that emotion. And
Mhm.
so I have very strong one-on-one relationships
Mhm.
with my children, my partner, that sometimes it almost feels like I'm missing a lot of things that's happening out in the world because I can't be all over the place trying to be two people, three people, four
Mhm.
people. I
Mhm.
can only be my one best person.
Mhm.
One time I came to your house and you were burning this red, I think, I don't, it was a candle. It was a rose candle. Um, do you know the candle?
Yes.
Yeah, right.
It wasn't rose, but yes. Yes. Altar.
Yes,
Yes.
yes, right.
Mhm.
And there was something about the scent of this candle that made me pause. It made me really understand that I couldn't enjoy it if I was thinking about where can I get it and what can I do. I just wanted to just I was setting up the table, getting ready to do a massage for you, and I'm smelling this, and I said, "This is taking me somewhere." And it took me to a space where it felt safe. It
Mm.
felt like this is what I'm supposed to be feeling. This is what I'm supposed to be doing. I'm being very present. And sometimes I will look back on that experience when I'm rushing and I'm trying to go. I'm like, wait, wait, wait.
Mhm.
how are you supposed to be feeling? Are you feeling like you're supposed to be where you are? Are you being present? And so for you, because there's so much that you're doing, so much, right? But where do you feel the most present, and not just in your home, like doing what? And she smiles.
I'm really feeling it now when I journal.
Mm,
I started journaling in 2020 before we were all quarantined, like late January.
okay.
And the journals that I use, one of them is a planner. And even though all of my appointments go into my phone, there's something for me about writing them down in a book
Absolutely.
and checking them off as I get to them and circling the things that I don't get to so that I remember to transfer them to another day.
Mm-hmm.
That works really well for me. And when I start my day journaling and I write down dreams as if they have come true,
Mm.
which gets me to focus on 10 things every single day, writing them over and over again as
Wow.
if they've happened.
Wow.
So they're always top of mind. And then I write down 5 things for which I'm grateful.
Mm-hmm.
And they're usually small things because it's not supposed to be, oh, I'm grateful for my family.
Right.
And then because when you first start doing it, you feel like you have to think of 5 things.
Right.
But the more you do it, it's not have to anymore. They come top of mind because
flow.
you notice them throughout the day. You
Mm-hmm.
notice, oh, I'm going to write this down tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
I'm grateful for this.
Mm-hmm.
And you start to become grateful for little things.
Like what?
Like a really good cup of coffee,
Girl, you better talk about it.
the house being quiet,
I just
the
built some
bath water
shelves.
was like just right.
Listen, I just built some shelves in my hallway. One of my sons built it. It's like 6 shelves, and I was able to fold clothes and put it away neatly. I was
Right?
like, this is great. Just gonna just sit here and look at this wall.
Yes.
Because I
Yes.
feel space.
Yeah.
I'm so grateful for that.
And it's the kind of thing that when I do it every day, it has nothing to do with a goal
Mm.
except for writing them down.
Mhm.
But you could look at it as a waste of time. I could have done something else with
No.
that half hour.
No.
But I'm so present in my life in those moments that I'm writing those things down. And then you have to write down, like, if I do this, I'm going to be so proud of myself today.
Yeah.
And then there's what could interrupt you that you don't get it done. So then you're sort of on the lookout for those things.
You're protecting that purpose that you're creating, right?
Yeah. And I wanted to go back to something that you had said before, because you asked about what is it that you would tell, like what I would tell entrepreneurs.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing that we are just not going to hear, right? Because we're basically learning from people who have the generational experience.
Yeah.
So for them, it's not the first, but for a lot of us, it's the first.
The first.
And we're the only.
And the only. The first and the only.
So then you're a leader.
Mm.
Leaders don't necessarily win. Leaders are not the best. Leaders don't make the most money. The job of a leader is to carve out the path.
Exactly. And it's not always the most glamorous.
Nope.
At all.
Nope.
Mm-hmm.
And we leave the breadcrumbs.
Mm-hmm.
And we're always moving this way while we're still holding the door open this way. And so we have to give ourselves grace in that we're leaders. And because we're leaders, the ones that are behind us can look at us and say, oh,
yeah,
I'm not going to do that.
Yeah.
Because you see what happened when she did that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we're not going to do that. We're going to do it different. So then they're going to be better than you.
Absolutely.
And they may or may not have the grace to acknowledge that they learned from you. So then you get to sit in that space
Well,
that you carve,
let's talk about that.
that you carved
Mm-hmm.
for them to walk through
Mm-hmm.
while they step on you to get past you.
Listen to me.
And just know that you got to be okay with that in
Yeah.
some ways, because
That part,
you've chosen the path.
that part
of
has
the
nothing
leader.
to do with you,
Right.
right? That's none of
Right.
your business, right? So, because
It just doesn't feel good.
It
you know?
doesn't.
And this is where the therapy comes in handy.
it helps.
When you could get on the phone and be like, look,
Let me tell you what just happened.
let me tell you what
Do
this
this
chick
BS.
did.
And then be able to let it go,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, because there's another sister friend of mine told me she doesn't. I think the terminology is don't be bitter, get better, right? And it was just some experiences that we both, encountered that you want to go, but hey, how didn't I? how this happening?
Wasn't I the first one?
And then, but you realize, no, I was not the first one.
Exactly.
Right? And that's
Exactly.
humbling. You're not the first
Yep.
one. You're not the person who, because there's those shoulders, right? And it's that part of being humbled to be able to look at all the people who come in and go, I really see what you're doing. I was like, how are you doing, Khadijah? I'm great. Come here, girl. Come here, sit down for a minute. Here, drink this water. And let me tell you what's happening. I remember you told me when we were buying things for the space, you're like, don't buy too many new things. It's gonna get broken. And I was like, what? You're like, it's somebody gonna drop it. It's like, not on purpose, but it's gonna happen.
Go to Marshall's.
Go to Marshall's. Right? There's some bins on the side. Do that, right? And use your creativity. And
Yep.
so we're sitting in the garden house right now, and you're sitting on this beautiful Chase lounge that when I came to your home one day, I was so tired. I think I was running away from here. There was an event that I was doing, and I was like, I'm gonna come to your house. Right? So I got there, and I think this was in your bedroom. And I remember sitting in there going, "Oh, I need this in my life."
No. You
What did I
sat in
say?
it And you said, I hope you realize I'm not going nowhere.
I think I did say that.
You gonna do what you need to do.
I'ma be
I'll
here.
Be right here. I'll make it up and get some tea. But then I'm gonna come right back.
Gordon walked past. I was like, "Hey, Gordon, I'm here. Listen, I need this. I need this spot." And so the first time you called me and said, many million times, "Hey, I have this. I'm changing some things around. Do you want it?" I was like, "Oh my God, yeah." And then pile on the list, like from signage to this beautiful chandelier to the mixer. Tell me about the mixer.
Samantha.
You named him. How did the mixer get a name like Samantha?
This woman who worked for me, Nellie, she named her Samantha.
That's crazy.
The brand name is like Sparta or something
Yeah,
like that.
yeah.
So there's like a big S on the side.
Mm-hmm.
And Nellie decided she didn't like Sparta, so she named her Samantha. And then everybody called her Samantha for years.
So the real reason why we built the garden house is because I needed a space for Samantha. I swear. I was like, I can't get into the basement. It's too heavy. We can't take it to the apartment. That's where we're going to put it. And I was like, oh, we're going to put it in the backyard, but it needs a house, right?
Wow.
And that's it. And each time I ask you a question or I'll give you, I'm like, I'm making this product. What do you think? And you would give me really big insight. Like, oh, I smell the undertones of this, and this is what you need to do, and this is how it should happen. That is so big of you. Like, just the way that you give and the way that you...
It was done for me.
Whoo, Lisa. And I swear, that's like, people ask me, why do I do what I do? Is because it was done for me. And so when we don't get the recognition, when we don't get the thank you, right? Which is going to be a lot of people. It's when you're able to do it for someone else and they do see it, and then you're able to look back and see all the things that people have done for you. You know, you are magic in my life, beyond Carol's daughter, beyond anything that people think they know about you. I've called you in moments where like, hey, and you're like, it's gonna be fine. I'm like, oh, you sure? Okay, good. That's it.
The other part of it, though, too, is there's information that I share with you, but you still have your own story.
Mm-hmm.
The problem is when the person doesn't have their own story
Yeah.
and they take yours.
Yeah.
That's when it's, but it technically isn't a problem for you. It's a
Mm-hmm.
problem for
For them.
them,
Mm-hmm.
because that's short lived and that's not sustainable. But what we do has been done for centuries.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not new. It's not ours. We don't own it.
Right.
But how we tell the story. You're going to mix roses and cinnamon and orange peel in a way that I
I
never
didn't.
thought about.
Exactly.
And somebody else is going to, do it a different way. And so the woman that I learned from, she still has her business today. Her company's called Higher Heights. Her
Mm.
name is Beverly. She's based in Florida.
Mm-hmm.
And she would share raw material suppliers with me and, give me advice on, I melted this and then I
Hmm.
mixed in that and then
Hmm.
this happened and I can't understand why it's doing that. And she wasn't telling me her recipes, but she was telling me that I had the flame up too high, or I
Mm.
needed to stir something longer because sometimes this crystallizes, and it's kind of like, how do you use the stove and the tools,
Yes.
but not
Yes.
how much do you
To
put in.
exactly.
And I knew not to go that far, to just
Mm-hmm.
be like, okay, tell me how you make the face wash. I'm not gonna do, I'm not gonna
Tell me because people come in. Tell me the recipe of how you make the rose water. I'm like,
no.
really? I mean, do you
No.
actually hear what you're asking me?
Yeah, like, no,
That's
I'm
it.
not gonna do that. I'll tell you the ingredients, but yeah, I'm not gonna tell you how to make it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but she also knew that my story wasn't her story. We
Mm-hmm.
have two very different stories,
Mm-hmm.
and there's nothing about our products that looks similar,
Exactly.
because she's not trying to tell my story, and I wasn't trying to tell her story.
Woo. And being able to honor your story, right?
Mm.
And so when we honor where we are, how we got where we got, what the things that we do to create balance in our experiences, that's what shows up in all the potions and the good smells and the good, right?
Mm-hmm.
Do you ever wish that you did what you did differently? Like the
No.
first time that you stood in front of someone and you opened up and you said, "Here, smell this." And they're like, "Oh my God, I love it." Would you have done it differently? Or would you, is the journey the exact
Mm-mm.
journey that you have taken?
I mean, if I did it all over again,
Mm-hmm.
if I said, tomorrow I'm going to start a new company, are there things that I would do differently than I did 30 years ago?
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely, because I'm smarter,
Yeah.
right? Like, I'm not going to be stupid.
Right.
I learned what didn't work, I learned what didn't make sense. I know what makes sense when you have to make 10,000 pieces versus what makes sense when you can make 100 pieces.
Hmm.
And it's a different process and it's a different world. But I wouldn't change what happened, because then I don't know where I'd be. I might not be right here,
Mm.
and I might not know what I know. So the mistakes are okay.
What is success to you?
Being able to enjoy what I do, even though I do it differently,
Mm.
still being able to enjoy what I do and not have to make money off of it.
Say that again. Say that part.
Being able to enjoy what I do and not have to make money off of it.
Because daggone it, the hustle. The hustle will
So
squeeze the life out of it.
Yes, and I discovered that I can still make products in the kitchen,
Lisa's
and I
kitchen.
can give them away. And for years that was how we ate and
Yeah.
paid the rent and paid the tuition for the kids to go to school
Mhm.
and bought their clothes.
Mm-hmm.
And now that's a separate income stream, so I can go in the kitchen and make things just for the joy
Just for the
of
joy.
doing it,
Mm-hmm.
and putting it in a jar and getting a label printed and all of that,
And then
and
setting
then
it for
just-
the holidays, and we just
and
go,
just
yes,
and
Lord.
just give it away.
Mhm.
And I never knew that was even a goal until I did it, and I was like, oh my God,
This
this
feels
feels
great.
amazing.
Yeah. Yeah.
This feels so good to be able to do this, to still do my craft,
Hmm.
but not have to worry, okay, how much did I make off of that
Such a
pot?
blessing.
Could I cover
That's
the
such a blessing.
expenses of it? Yeah.
That's such a blessing. Um, when you, and this is a big question, you let me know if we can ask this. When you moved from being Carol's daughter to being bought by a larger company, not so much the details of that, but how did you deal with the reaction of the public? Like, it was people's, their first store in Fort Greene was like an altar space for me. I remember being in a position of just emotional destitution and walking in. I had holes inside my pocket in my coat, and I had my hands kind of stuffed in, and so my hands would just go really low, right? But you couldn't tell. But I didn't have any money. I didn't even have money for coffee. I was just kind of strolling around, and the scent of the products always made me feel good. And I remember
Mm-hmm.
walking in, and it was clear I wasn't buying anything. So the salesperson was just kind of like, "Can I help you?" Because he's like, "You look a little sketchy." I was like, "I'm not. I'm just sad." Right? But at some point, moving away from that space and that space, that physical space not being there, but now it's a big thing. I almost felt like I lost the connection until I started using the products again. But then until I met you and really knew you,
Mm-hmm.
that I was like, oh, there's no disconnect from who that was. There's growth, right?
Mm-hmm.
But growth kind of makes people feel uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
Not the person who's growing only, but the people who are part of that process.
Mm-hmm.
What was people's reactions, and then how did you deal with it?
it was it was a lot, and it's something that I still deal with because surprisingly 7 years later people act like it's new
It's
news.
only 7 years.
Yeah, this November will be 8 years, but yeah, it's still like it's new news.
Wow.
But um, what I felt at the time was anger
Mm.
because I knew how much work it took for us to be in that position. I knew how rare
Mm.
it was for us to be in that
Hmm.
position.
Yeah.
And I knew firsthand the work that I did, that my husband did, that my mother did, my mother in law, my brothers, my uncle, all of the different people who worked for me.
Right.
I knew what what we had all done together. And I knew that I was not just taking myself into this new space, but I was taking an entire staff
Hmm.
with me who had medical insurance with me, but not like what they were going to get, who had salaries with me, but not like what they were going to get.
Mm-hmm.
And into an environment that would enable them to springboard their careers in this industry in very different ways. So what appeared to a lot of people as a very selfish solo situation was not. It was a group decision. And I was also in the position for the first and only time in my life to literally gift
Talk about that.
money to
Talk.
people
Talk about that.
because we as the owners of the company and the investors in the company, we made the decision that a certain amount of the sale money was coming out of our shares
Mm.
and it was going to the staff.
Hmm.
And to walk around the office
I get chills every time I hear
and
this story.
hand people checks
Whew.
that they never got before and might not ever
Ever
get
get
again
again? Mm-hmm.
was like I get teary-eyed when I think about it. In some ways I wish it had been filmed because what I see in my mind's eye of that day was so beautiful.
Yeah.
And I watched people run to um, the CEO of the company, Richard, and like embrace him and it was like a scene in the street, like when you look at something on the news and some victory was won in some country
Yeah.
far away, or
Yeah.
like a dictator was overturned or something, and
Mm-hmm.
everybody's dancing in the streets.
Mm-hmm.
Well, they were just jumping in the office and
Because it's life changing.
squealing. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that, so those are things that the hateful words can't take that away from me.
Whew.
um, so initially I was angry because I felt like there was so much that wasn't understood. But then, so the announcement was made on a Monday. By Friday of that week, I was sitting in an audience in Miami for Oprah's Live Your Best Life tour. And Oprah was talking about how she had built this network
Mm.
and it was losing money and
Mm.
losing advertisers and struggling.
Mm.
And she was sitting outside by these 4 oak trees, and they're her favorite trees to go and pray and talk to the ancestors and think things through. And she said that she was sitting out by the oak trees and realized that her grandmother
Hmm.
raised her to be a good maid and to hopefully work for some nice white people.
Because it's safe, practical.
And she said, and I own a network. And these are not her exact words,
Thank you.
but basically she was saying that why am I worried about the problems? Because at the end of the day, I own a network.
A whole ass network.
A whole and I was supposed to be a maid for some nice white people.
Mm-hmm.
So I remember sitting in that audience and feeling like, you fool. You've been walking around angry, upset all week. Why'd they say this? Why'd they say that? You sold your company. You paid your people. All of your people are still with you. You did something amazing and miraculous and wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
And why the hell are you letting them take away your joy?
Ooh.
And I went back to my office the following Monday, brought everybody back into the same conference room that we brought them in the Monday before, when we told them, oh, by the way, this is what's happening, because they didn't know. There were 4 people at the company that knew what was going on. Everybody else did not know what was happening. So, and I said to them, I said, if any of you feel any kind of way, if you're feeling guilty, upset, ashamed, let it go. Because we did something amazing together.
Yes.
We are making history together.
Yes.
And you have to be proud of it.
And own it.
And if they can't understand it, fuck them. That's it.
And that's a quote.
Fuck them.
And that's a quote.
And then at that point, I said, it's my job to educate, because they don't know what it takes to get here. And we're going to have to do this a lot more.
Because we climbing.
Because that's how you're going to build wealth.
That's right.
Because even what I did in, if we look at what's going on today, and I can't name companies in that way,
ma'am,
but the zeros are getting added. My situation was an 8-figure situation.
Mm-hmm.
And there's another situation that was a 9-figure situation. When I got my investment back in 2007, it was 8 figures, and that was epic. To get 8 figures.
Absolutely.
The most recent was 9. But when you look at Charlie, he do that all day.
All day. But because we're not familiar with it within our own process, because we are the one, right? We are the beginning. Oh, girl, making a mess. We are sometimes the beginning, sometimes the only one, sometimes in the group of. We're taking coaching classes. We're doing all the things that the struggle is okay. People are very much okay with struggling and or seeing you struggle. It's like, this is so good. I'm so amazing. It's like you're doing so much. But when you are able to rise up from the struggle, because the struggle, you can help some people, right? But when you get to the thriving part, and that's like an emotional space too,
Mm-hmm.
there's a vast majority of people that you can support, much like your staff, who's able to, after however long and how many millions of hours, for you to be able to look at them and go, hey, we did this thing in here.
Mm-hmm.
This is my appreciation to you. No one really gets to hear that on the outside. And even when they do hear it, I think because people aren't really living this particular
And
existence, they don't understand it.
and I think they hear it in a way it's not intended.
Mm-hmm.
I think they hear me saying, "Oh, I felt so good that I had so much money I could give some away,"
That's not what you
and that's
said.
not it.
Mm-mm.
That's not it.
Mm-hmm.
It's there were 12 of us on a list, roughly, who had to agree
Wow.
that this amount should be given. And that doesn't mean that all 12 are really down for that.
Mm-hmm. So it's a little
So
fight
there's
here
some
and there. Yeah.
conversation
That's a nice way of
because
putting it.
each person has
to
to
take-
give up
Yeah.
that part of what they worked for in order to do that, because it's not a gift in that sense of the word. It's giving people their piece of the work that they did.
Okay. How important, for me, what I've learned in the last, my life, that good character is important.
Mm-hmm.
And how people show up in their good character is, it's their truth, right? And so there's a lot of ways that we can show up that is not necessarily our best selves, but it's immediate gratification to cuss someone off or tell them about themselves or tell them to go fly a kite. But there's also that space of your character, how I react to things, what I do, how I show up. I always think about, what would my children say?
Mm-hmm.
Like what would be their response to how I respond to this? When I'm trying to teach them a lesson about how they should show up in this world, I also have to be that example. And so sometimes my decisions, it doesn't look like, almost looks like I back away from a lot of things. And I choose to do so because my character is important.
Mm.
How I express myself,
Mm-hmm.
the honesty in which I move from, being able to say sorry, being able to say, you know what, I could have done better in that situation. How, not necessarily how have people done you dirty, that's not the question,
Mm-hmm.
but in life, the things that you've experienced, how important has character, a person's character, how important is that for you?
Okay, I'm going to borrow from
Oh,
Bishop
Lord.
Jakes,
Come on.
because this video was sent to me one morning when I was sitting in Tampa airport sipping on my Starbucks, trying to wake myself up after working all night long on HSN. And
It wasn't a glamorous life. You just wasn't just no. It wasn't
no.
spas and no
Mm-mm.
and that.
Mm-mm. And it opened up my eyes. And it was a YouTube video where he talked about confidants, constituents, and comrades.
Talk about it.
The confidants are the people in your life who are for you
Mm-hmm.
and for what you are for. So those are the people that you can tell your dreams to, because they're for what you're for. They're for you achieving those dreams, but then they're also for you.
Exactly.
Your constituents are not necessarily for you, but they are for what you're for.
Mm-hmm.
So they share your dreams and your goals. But if somebody else comes along that's doing it a little bit shinier and different, and they feel like they can get further ahead because they're not for you, your constituents will leave.
Right.
But your constituents are like the scaffolding on a building.
Mm-hmm.
They have their time, they serve their purpose. But we get jacked up when we mistake a constituent for a confidant. And the scaffolding can't stay on the building the whole time. At some point, it's got to go away. It has its job, you can't leave the scaffolding up the whole time, because then when is building ever going to
Brilliant.
open? When is
Brilliant.
it going to be finished?
Brilliant.
And your comrades are against what you're against.
Mm-hmm.
But it's easy to not confuse them for a confidant. So when I heard that, it was like,
Because you just blew my whole mind right now.
and I started looking at people in my life like,
Mm-hmm.
you're actually a constituent.
Okay.
I thought you were a confidant.
But I'm glad that I know now.
Right. And it doesn't make them bad.
No, of course not.
It doesn't make them
But
bad.
you're able to
it
see
doesn't
people.
make them negative. But you understand who they are in your life and why they're there.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think people like us that end up with a lot of work to do and a lot of people in our lives, if we live in the space of everyone's a confidant, we're exhausted because we're treating everybody as if
they're permanent structures in this process.
Right.
Yeah.
And then when they walk away,
You're like,
well,
where are you
why
going?
did they
Like,
walk
why'd you
away
leave?
from-
I don't
why-
understand.
but
we didn't finish.
we were best friends. Like, why did you know? And because you didn't realize that it was for a season,
a reason, a season,
Yeah.
or a time. Yeah.
and it doesn't mean that it was
it's
bad.
not bad.
It's
just
it's
being
just
able
done.
to recognize. Is being
Yeah.
able to recognize why people show up in your life and why you show up in their lives.
Right.
Right. So.
And then, you know, when you were talking about character, the I think that as Black people, because so much has been done to us that's not right, we're very, very focused on being right, doing right, saying right, because there's been so many
much
lies
wrong,
and
so much wrong,
mistruth and all of that. But we have to remember that other people didn't live lives like that. So they're not going to think that way. And not that we should change, because we shouldn't change, but we get into a space where we don't understand why someone else is successful and they're lying and cheating and stealing, and we're being true and we're not getting ahead. And someone said to me, favor is not always fair.
Come on. It's like I'll finish this off and say thank you for being my confidant. My whole homegirl. And also it is Women's History Month. And you always say that you call your mother's name so much, even like in your business, but you call her name. And I started doing that. You know, my mom is still with us and thriving and kicking, and I'm so happy for that. But there's something that she taught me. And one is the main thing, what's going to be for you is for you. Like, mind your business, do what you need to do, stay in good character, and what is supposed to be for you is going to be for you. And the fact that we're sitting here in this space in this time, when I was walking through Carol's daughter with holes in my pocket, and now I'm sitting with my sister, I appreciate that advice that she gave me. It's good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And listening to you tell that story, like, brings me so much joy. And I don't have any sadness that store isn't there anymore. Because in some ways, the store was a constituent for a while.
Absolutely.
It's not necessary anymore.
Absolutely.
To tell the story. The story can be told.
There's more
ways.
chapters and more people living the story.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And there was another woman who told me a story about how she would go to the store and walk around and smell things because it made her feel better.
Absolutely.
And she was in a really dark place. She was actually living in a shelter. And she had enough money to buy a jar of bath salts.
That would be me.
And she kept the bath salts in the shelter and took them out to remind herself that things would get better.
Things would get better. Absolutely.
And she ended up sharing that story with me on a day when I felt like the biggest failure in the world. like everything that I tried to do that day was going wrong. And I hadn't seen her in years. And we just ran into each other, and she shares this story with me. And I remember running to a payphone because we didn't have phones in our pockets then, and calling my mother and telling her, look at what God just did for me. Because I felt like crap this morning. And this woman just told me that a jar of bath salts was keeping her alive in a shelter.
Boom. Mind blowing. Mind blowing.
Yeah.
Thank you. That's my friend.